called Supernatural Relationships. And I'm joined by Josh LaFave, who is on our team here. He's on staff here at Elevation Church. Josh is in the production realm. He's a worshiper, he's a production guru, and he's also a parent, and he's a kid. Yes. So you're in relationships with people, so you qualify. And just total truth and transparency and truth in advertising here. I literally pulled Josh as we were bringing this to you. I just pulled him, 30 minutes ago?
Yep.
And said, hey, Josh, I really feel like we should do a second part to Raising Giantkillers, which aired last week. And we really should do a part 2 and do more of a Q&A on this, because I really respect your mom and dad, Gary and Carla LaFave, who have an incredible program called Emotional Wellness by Design. They have Better Parenting by Design, and a lot of the tips that really helped Hope and I in learning how to parent our kids, we learned from your parents. And this guy is a fruit of his parents. Not that you're a fruit. You're not a fruit.
Thanks.
But I wanted to just kind of start, Josh, with, we've been talking about things last week. We talked about training up a child in the way they should go when they're old, they're not to depart, meaning identifying who is this kid, and they're all different. Where are their strengths? Where are their weaknesses? And then the other part that I talked about was peacemaking versus peacekeeping in a home. And knowing your parents, knowing Carla and Gary, they were very good at not peacekeeping and appeasing you as kids. So in essence, there was freedom to explore the terrain in your house.
Yeah.
But yet there were boundaries there that brought safety and protection, which is really what all authority is for, is to empower those they lead, to empower and protect, not enslave and control. And so many of us have learned enslavement and in controlling environments in different facets. So yet if you don't have boundaries, things can get out of control and really weird fast. So I just wanted to start with you, Josh, as a child. If you could kind of start off, what were the greatest things as a kid who is now an adult? What did you so most appreciate from 0 to 18 living with your parents? What did you most appreciate about the environment that they created that was reflective of his heart?
I think it was, really not they weren't controlling. They really let us kind of manage our own freedoms. It wasn't, because I've seen with some friends at times and their relationships of being so controlled that they rebel more, in different things. So I felt like they taught us right and wrong, but they had let us manage our own freedoms and make our decisions. But we knew we could go to them with questions and different things of how to do things. But I think it was the freedom, that we kind of had that really made made it easier to, I guess, not want to do wrong, I guess, because you didn't feel. It's like, I feel like when you're younger, sometimes you want to do the opposite of what your parents tell you.
Right.
It's just our nature to kind of, want to do the opposite of what someone's telling you to do. So I feel like because they weren't so controlling, and they helped guide us, and they always were there to support us. And
do you have an example that just, comes to mind that helped shape you? Like maybe it was a moment that, if anybody knows Josh LaFave, there's very few people that I know on this planet that don't like Josh LaFave. There's no guile in this. I call him boy because he's under 30, and anyway. But there's no guile in this young man. So I don't know, but can you think of a time that really shaped you and you feel like looking back altered you as a kid? Because I love what I see now. I think people who know you and the fruit of that. We all know you're not perfect, but I think if we're raising Giantkillers who want to change culture, and we'll get into some more of the fruit of your life that I think is really cool. What was a defining moment with your parenting or with your parents to you?
Well, I guess I can give a kind of an example of like even a relationship of dating and different things. My parents really push us not to date, until we're like 16, 18 years old, but but they didn't control us. Some of my sisters dated before that, but they're one of the things that were like, it doesn't make sense for you to go on a date if we're having to drive you to your date, when you're under 16, So that was like a big thing. So I kind of took it upon myself, like, I don't really want to go on a date if my parents are the ones driving me on a date. I want to wait until I'm 16 to at least date. And I didn't even date him until it was right before I married Lauren. Really how my dating was growing up. I used to joke around, growing up, date everyone. When you're going out in groups with all your friends, you really get to know the people. You get to observe and get to see the relationships you have with different friends and all that. So I always joked around. I was like, I just dated everyone when I
Did they foster that in you, or is that personal to you?
I think that was like personal to me, but I think they fostered the freedom of how we could go about it, because my sisters and I were a little different in some of the ways we did.
If you know
relationships.
Josh LaFave's sisters too, they are dynamos, all of them. I know I've known your family for a long time. They are all superb human beings. So would you say then, Josh, you were mentioning the dating years. As you got older, I didn't hit on this as much last week because is more macro, but raising giant killer teens. Wow, every year there's new options out there. There's technology. There's things that are inappropriate. I mean, when you were growing up, Instagram wasn't there. When I was growing up, let's just call it for what it is. Some of the pornographic things that are out there, you had to go to a store hidden on a shelf to have access to. In today's day and age, it's all out there everywhere. Wow, a lot of options.
Yeah.
But yet your parents still faced the dynamics of that, because you could go over to a friend's house and see things that aren't appropriate. Like, there was HBO and all these things that there's always inappropriate opportunities.
Yeah.
How did your parents empower you that way? Not control you, but also realize we don't want Josh and our kids seeing things that aren't so good. How did they navigate that?
They just continue to, instill encouragement of, staying pure, and there's different levels of purity, I guess, and I guess they were just continually always, when we did devotions and different things like that, we were doing things that were tied into that season of life, and the things that people are going through. So we would talk about those discussions of what, because a lot of those devotionals were current to those seasons of life. And so basically it would, bring up, conversation of what my sisters were, they kind of went back and forth from homeschool to public school. And so we would be able to discuss the different things and dynamics that they would, encounter in school. And then mine was different because I stayed homeschooled actually through the whole.
I love that. So they homeschooled and they did public school, and they won on all accounts. And that's kind of what my wife and I did. We've homeschooled, we've sent our kids to private, and we've done public. And what we found is engaging the conversation no matter where you go wins, because you're the parent.
Right.
And I know there's different schools of thought. I'm not here to tell you. I think every kid's different. Yeah. Josh was different than some of his sisters, and they all won. But I think what I love hearing is your parents, and I said this last week, your parents engaged you. They developed heart connection and a conversation. Right. So if you saw something, well, let me just ask you bluntly, you're an amazing person. Did you see things that were inappropriate before 0 to 18, either unwillingly or willingly? Either way, did you see some things that weren't good?
Yeah.
How did your parents handle that without helicopter parenting you?
Some of those things, even the things that were, I guess, with friendships or different things that I was at another, I would just walk away from those things. I don't know how they kind of instilled that, but it was kind of in me. It wasn't just that I was thinking what my parents would think. I was more on what God think of, that.
So they helped you capture the vision of what purity looked like for you,
Yeah.
as opposed to them shaping and controlling you through fear.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like, if for those of you who love parenting resources, Gary and Carla were great. Danny Silk from Bethel, great ministry, Loving on Purpose Ministries. He has great aspects on kids, but he likens it sometimes to behavior modification. If we're always cracking the whip on something, it's like telling a cow who it eventually needs to go to the restroom, that they can't ever go to the restroom, and you're just so you're creating it where it can't ever go to the restroom. At some point, what's going to happen if that cow can't go to the restroom? It's going to blow up, and it's going to create not a good thing. I know that's kind of graphic, and like, how could you say that? I'm saying Danny Silk used this, so blame Danny, not me. Anyway, but the point is, we can do that with raising our kids. You can so crack the whip and create such a fear culture that they stuff it all in, they hold it all in, and they're not going to tell mom and dad that they've looked at something inappropriately. Why? Because they're holding it all in. What's going to happen like that, cow? Boom, when they go to college at 18, you've heard the stats. Wow, I've got a free smorgasbord here in Madison to do everything that I couldn't do when I was under mom's and dad's control. What I heard you say was, wow, they navigated the culture in all of its sewage before you got there. Tell them about the fruit of that, Josh, as it pertains to purity and your journey into marrying Lauren, who, by the way, Lauren is a gem, and if you haven't met Lauren LaFave, you need to. She is the sweetest, purest soul. I actually got to watch them dating, and we were on a missions trip once, and I could see Lauren flirting with you, and Josh was just kind of zoning, and I'm like, dude, you need a clue. Get a clue. Lauren was a gem. Anyway, you wound up marrying Lauren, but describe to parents and maybe some teens who are watching, what was that like? Like, how did you tell them about your purity journey?
Well, I actually was trying to think. It was probably where I really made the decision, that I wanted to save myself for my wife, was probably about, I don't know, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, somewhere around there, just kind of like, I want to save down to not just, sex and all that, but down to kissing my wife is the first and last person that I would kiss. And she was the first person. I was going to wait till the wedding day, which I didn't wait till the wedding day to kiss her. But we stayed pure until, once we got engaged, that was our first kiss. Basically how Lauren and I, we actually, our journey kind of was through church. And my sister went to school with her at Montessori, or not Montessori, the cosmetology school. And she started coming to our church, and she went on a missions trip with us. She started to get involved with the youth, and we were just doing ministry and stuff together. And we just got to know each other through ministry. And some people saw it before I even saw it.
Everybody saw it before Josh saw it. She was always flirting with him. I mean, she had it for him big time. I'm sorry, Lauren. I don't mean to be throwing you under the bus here, but it was just so cute to see. It was so cute and so pure. And so the reason I like having you here and discussing this is, again, we're not here to say, oh no, I kissed somebody before marriage. I think there's things we all agree are inappropriate. Places of touch, inappropriate. We all know that. What we're talking about here is heart posture and heart connection. And I guess what I'm saying is your parents helped foster in you core values so deep that you were like, you know what? I'm going to fight for purity even when it's hard. But your parents, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've talked to Carla about this a lot, and we've done this with our kids. You did not have the talk one time. You had the talk all the time. Yeah. Yes?
Yeah.
Can you detail that more?
I mean, we were just constantly just totally real with each other. Because if you don't talk about that kind of stuff with, your parents or, actually your whole family. Sometimes you discuss different things, if you're not real and honest and you don't feel comfortable to go, where's that relationship? If you're not comfortable enough to talk to your parents about that and your family members, they're the closest ones to you. And I feel like, if your relationships, are really there, you can just about talk about anything. And yeah, there can be uncomfortableness just because of the certain topics, but it's actually, there's just something about not the purity of the relationship, but the depth of the relationship that you're able to go deeper and talk about things.
So let's go deeper. So here's Josh LaFave growing up in a culture. Again, the world is constantly evolving, but I think it's important because you fought for purity every step of the way, and people around you, you're watching your friends as you grow up in the church culture. Many of them great people and love them, but making choices that you wouldn't make.
Yeah.
How did you navigate that? Because peer pressure is a real thing, and well, gosh, if Johnny and Bobby and Susie and everybody else are letting go of their purity, and I see hypocrisy in the church, why not just let her rip, man, and just live for me? Like what? I mean, obviously God, but walk us through the nurturing. Because in this area, Josh, you are an absolute giant killer. You got a heart of God on that, and he was a virgin until he got married. Mm-hmm. I, on the other hand, before I met my wife, Hope, that was not the case for me. My wife and I have been open about that. But when I met my wife, I treated it the same way you treated purity.
Yeah.
And in both cases, we both have seen the fruit of maintaining that celibacy, that validation of who our spouses are, and it sent a real message, I bet, to Lauren, because I know it did to Hope, that I value who you are more than your body and what you can do for me. And we fought for that purity. For us, I met my wife, and a year later we got married. But I never touched her. I never did anything inappropriate, and that was not my prior experience with relationships. So yeah. God got a hold of that. You did that.
Yeah.
And you also watched your friends and whatnot not make those choices. How did you then, deal with those moments, the tough ones?
I feel like I really had to own it myself. It was something I really had to want for myself. And I guess the biggest, thing that I think back, I used to think, these awesome out here in youth groups and different things, these awesome testimonies of these people making all these wrong decisions and coming back and totally turning their lives around. I'm like, I want a cool testimony like that, but I don't really want to do all those sinful things. But then one time I heard in a message or different things like that he had a similar situation of like mine, and he was like, the biggest testimony of me is how God helped me stay pure and away from all those things, or overcame. Because I feel like some of those temptations, actually it's harder sometimes to be pure in different things when there's all these temptations in this world, and it's just so easy. It's so easy for you to, start snowballing and making all these wrong decisions, and like all it takes is start with kissing and these different things. So you got to think through the process. You make one step that could just roll you into the,
Yeah, and what I appreciated about your parents is they weren't legalistic in the sense that, Josh, you can never kiss anybody until you're 25. Not that. I think we're all clear on what inappropriate, sexual things are, okay? Yeah. Pornography, all that. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that. The reason why we don't talk a ton about pornography is because pornography is not the lead story. Revelation of the heart of the Father is, and his vision for your life trumps that. So there are people that all they focus on is the problem. Yeah. It's porn, it's this. Well, yeah, porn's a problem, but if all you're talking about is porn, what are you going to manifest? If all you're talking about is being a virgin, I got to stay pure, and that becomes your identity, guess what's going to be a real temptation? To not. So you can't, teens, I know your hormones are raging. We've all been there. But I was 29 and my hormones were raging.
Yeah.
And I got victory. I called it a second virginity. I mean, I got victory in that. Now, I know we're talking a little PG-13 tonight, but if the church can't talk about this stuff practically, and I gave you scriptures last week that set all this up. So for the legalists, where's all the Bible scriptures? We're giving you the heart of the Father all throughout this. Fighting for purity is all throughout the Bible. But these are the kind of discussions that the church has to fearlessly have. And if we're going to change the culture, the world has to see and champion people who get victory over that so it can be replicated. So this man was a giant killer in that area. Now, Josh, we're not saying that you've arrived and that you're a giant killer in every area. But at some point, the culture has to start celebrating wins that Christians are leading the charge on. And because here's what the world doesn't tell you. Oh, well, you know, I've got a great testimony. Yeah, God redeemed and restored my purity. But I also, Josh, from my end, had to go through years of undoing trauma from those bad choices of having premarital sex before I got married.
Yeah.
So no one likes to talk about that. I was totally restored and redeemed, and my Father loved me, and that's awesome. But don't you think for a second, to some teen or whoever I'm talking to right now, if you think exploring the territory is fun, sin's great for a season, it is not. There's a price to pay. The fight for purity is always worth it. Always. Yeah. And I've been on both sides of it, so I have experienced that way. But I really felt like we needed to elevate and champion what God did in you and through you because it is possible.
Yeah.
And so before we move on to our next thing, would you just pray over people? There may be people right now, and then we'll move on to our next topic. Will you pray over people who are either parents, their kids are embroiled in this, praying over parents, pray over the kids who are in the fight, and then maybe some who have lost their virginity as a teenager or whatever, and they're asking God to restore the standard. I think you have a grace on your life for that. Would you pray over them?
Sure. God, I just thank you for every person that's watching this right now. Lord, I just pray anyone that is going through something right now with relationships or even past relationships, Lord, I just pray maybe it's a renewing of purity, Lord. I just pray that you'll just clear all that trauma, all the different things that come to their mind and make them feel dirty or whatever that they're dealing with, Lord. I just pray just new purity in them, Lord. And I pray those that have the challenging thoughts and the things that they encounter in this crazy world, Lord. I just pray for guidance for the parents that are leading these teenagers, the teenagers that are even maybe watching. I just encourage them in Jesus' name that they will be encouraged and be surrounded by people of like interests, of good things, Lord. And Lord, I just pray a grace of purity over these teenagers in this impure world, Lord. And I just pray for the parents to be able to give them direction and support them and just be real with them and constantly asking good questions, and that the teenagers and the relationships with their parents, that they can ask their parents good questions.
Yes.
And I just pray grace, and love. And God, we just thank you for what you're going to do in these relationships. And I just bless them, Lord. Bless them.
Amen. Amen. And I just want to speak to some parents right now. You may be asking, Ryan, are there some resources out there? Are there people that we could glean from? Yes. A couple of things that I have talked about, a couple of ministries. One is Danny Silk. Loving on Purpose Ministries has a variety of different topics on different issues. If you want to go more web-based, material reads as well as some podcasts, Moral Revolution. It was started by a guy named Chris Valentin, who is out of Bethel Church in Reading. They've got some great topics that are more micro-specific, that are going to deal with some of the touchier subjects. So parents, if you're like, how do I broker a conversation with my kid to have not just the talk, but lots of talks. How do I do that? There's some great, more micro-specific resources that we simply don't have time in a 30-minute equip night session. Podcasts down the road, we will. That's part of where this church is going. Is Sunday is one thing, equip nights is another, discipleship training where we go deeper and we have more in-depth podcasts and, I mean, talking to our team and listening to their vision for the future. There's so much we can do. If we're going to set the standard of culture, people need to hear more of what God did through a Josh LaFave than what Hollywood is saying. And so here's what I do know, is that in a generation that has 1,000 options at their disposal with one click of the button, the generation that chooses God and purity amidst 1,000 bad options is the most powerful generation ever to exist. So Giantkillers who are authentic about their fight. They're not denying that Goliath is standing in front of them, that purity is to be fought for, but it's knowing that that giant can fall.
Yeah.
And that's really why I didn't even know why I was going to have you totally on until I asked you 30 minutes ago, but now I can feel the fire of God all over this talk. Josh, I want to pivot now. You made it through that. You and Lauren, now you're in full-time ministry. You are navigating a new season. You've got 3 precious boys. Oldest is now
3.
And 3 to just born recently.
Yeah.
You know, so they have their hands full. And you're a pastor navigating ministry. Whew, I'm tired. And you have to put up with me. But besides that, how are you doing this thing called parenting, Josh?
It's busy. I don't know what the best words are, but I feel like, you know, like he just gives you grace in the seasons, because it's like when you think about all the different things, you know, babies and different, you know, no sleep sometimes or not a lot of sleep. I don't know, you know, it's definitely crazy to look back and look at the seasons in life and how God prepares you for these different ones, because they're definitely way different than, you know, when you're a teenager or you're, you know, in the college season. Yeah, it's definitely.
What are you specifically learning about being a parent with 3 kids under the age of 3 and under, and married, and dating your wife, and all of that, and being a pastor, and, you know, all of that stuff? How do you navigate all that?
It's really, I think, what I think is it's all sufficient Jesus and his grace, because it's like, I mean, it is a lot, and, you know, it's a crazy season right now, just with all the different navigations of life. It's just.
What's your biggest struggle? I mean, we're always vulnerable here. What's your biggest struggle?
I think it's basically, I think we all struggle with it a little bit, is always making sure we're managing them all, you know.
In balance.
And so even though in different lights you feel like, oh, I'm doing pretty good at managing it, well, each season change and shift, especially when you got last year COVID and all that.
Wow.
You know, there's all these different things you're navigating. So it's really, I guess, that what's on my mind a lot is like, am I managing, you know, my time with my family, my wife, dating her, and then also making sure, you know, as a pastor, you know, spending time with the people that I need to be surrounded with, and then also just the duties I'm responsible of, and your goals, and my goals, you know. So there's a lot you're juggling, and you're learning how to juggle some of them. So it's it's really him, you know, you have to really spend time with him, even if you feel like you don't have a lot of time. It's spending time in the car, praying on your way to work, you know, taking those, you know, God gave me the grace to, you know, be able to give everything that I have.
Well, and I think maybe there's an illusion, because people look to us in some ways, and rightly so, as spiritual guidance and spiritual leaders, right? But I mean, I think people have taken comfort sometimes when I said, you know, there's not every day where I have a 7-hour quiet time before I start my day. I'm not up at 2 a.m. praying till 9, but when I walk into the door, and when you have young kids, you do because you have no choice because they're up all night, and so you're feeding them bottles or whatever. But that's a different season, kind of what you're in. Right. But it's giving yourself grace to know I'm not going to have the same approach to my day as if I'm 65,
right,
or if I'm a CEO. And so I know over the years I've heard people who are high capacity leaders, their job does not allow them to work under 40 hours a week. In fact, in some of their jobs don't work under 50 hours a week. There's a guilt that they can feel,
right?
But yet God can win in any environment with good communication. Yeah. I think I've learned that there's an illusion, though, that you can have it all at the same time. I think that's a lie. I don't think you can have everything all the same. I think there are seasons, if you're building a company and you're an entrepreneur, you're going to have to invest a little more time to get that thing going, and once you bring strength to it. But if you're always in that mode, you're going to lose your family, right?
Yeah.
There has to be, the rubber band can only stretch so far. Mm-hmm. I think we've learned that as a church culture. Right. We've learned... Do you remember that season when we did like 50 conferences one year? Yeah. Do you remember the setup and tear down vividly?
Yeah.
We were doing that all the time. Our bandwidth was stretched, and we learned something the next year. Remember, we're like, we're not going to do as many conferences this year. And then the year after, COVID hit.
Right.
Why did we learn that? Because I noticed as a father in the house, both as a real father and as a father of this guy, I'm like, if I keep doing this, I'm gonna run them into the ground. I'm gonna run our team into the ground. That's not healthy parenting. That's not healthy shepherding. Yeah. So we need to pull back and give up the need to conquer the world, in the sense of you only have so much energy to do so many things. Mm-hmm. So what we're gonna focus on right now, because if I'm unhealthy because I'm never seeing my kids, that will breed into you.
Yeah.
It will breed into others, and we'll replicate that in our environment. So in a sense, and I think we're starting to see this even now, Josh, as we made choices to create healthy environments in our homes and in our staff, I think our team is emotionally, not perfect for sure, but we're probably the most emotionally healthy and have more bandwidth to achieve the goals that God gave us by choosing our families.
Yeah.
And saying, if you got to go home, go home. If you need a comp day, go. I mean, we'll do the work, and if we can't get this goal done, should we have been doing it as a team anyway?
Right. Asking the hard questions.
Asking the hard questions and creating that environment. And I realize that some of you work in different jobs, that your bosses aren't as flexible. I get that. And even in me, they have to put up with me sometimes when I make a hard, fast decision that keeps us here, and maybe I missed it. I have to then go back and clean that up and say, dang, maybe we shouldn't have done 20 conferences because that affected our family life. Mm-hmm. So there is give and take. And I know that some of you work for environments and bosses that maybe aren't that way. But I will also say this, as I've said to them, nobody puts a gun to anybody's head to work here, and you're not a victim to your boss. So in essence, in your family life thought process, think about your family and understand, because we made these choices. Do you remember those conversations? Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I had little ones, do you remember when Josh has been with me for how long? Since 2000. You were our first employee.
Yeah.
2000, October of 2012, you were part-time.
Yep.
Do you remember those conversations we had? Oh, yeah. I'm like, Josh, I've been a pastor before. I saw working 70 hours a week trying to win everybody to Christ, what it was doing to my wife and kids. And they were real little. Marissa she's now 17, but at that time in 2011, so subtract 10 years, right? She was 7.
Yeah.
So they were all little.
Yeah.
And all 4 kids from ages 7 to just born. And I just said, I don't want to pay that price of working 70 hours a week to build a kingdom culture that really isn't building a kingdom culture. It's built out of fear that I'm not going to have a paycheck and I'm going to run my family into the ground and call it God.
Yeah.
No. So we made choices and have as a team. Is this going to give us a summer? We've had conversations in staff meetings going, all right, what do we need to do to prepare for the fall and this and that? But our band is stretched. How as a team can we relax a little bit more and take our vacation season and really refresh and recharge? We ask those hard questions now. Why? because we see the value of family. If we're not healthy in our families, how can we ask you to be healthy? Not perfect, I said, but healthy. Mm-hmm. Okay, Josh, I know we're getting close to calling this one, but there's different seasons. You've been as a dad now, you're just starting your journey. You've been a great son. If you could tell people one thing out of this conversation of all of the years from age 0 to 18 in the parenting years when kids are, or to parents, what's the one thing that you would tell them that really shaped you?
I think, well, I mean, it's the first word that kind of came to my mind, and it's love well. You need to love well. And what I mean by that is like how I remember my parents just growing up, as they loved us well, through, our childhood, through as we're older, and our relationship, it's different when we're older. We joke around that, sometimes, it's like we're kind of like friends, but we have to always look at them as parents, because you don't want to become too much like friends, because then it's not healthy that way either. So, but it's, I think, just loving well, loving your friends, your family, everyone. And I think that's kind of a thing, because he really shows us, he's the ultimate one that shows us the way, and mm-hmm. and if we love well and we love well with our relationships, it just shines through everything,
So good. And as we close, I want to add to the adult parents of adult kids. I want to close our talk with a little shout out to my dad and Meemaw, who I was 29 years old.
My age.
I was your age. And I had walked away from God for 15 years. My parents, my dad's first wife, they got divorced when I was 14. So I was rebellious and trauma. I drank underage. I did everything that my dad was at that time a pastor. He later got out of pastoral ministry at the time. But after that divorce, I just became a shipwreck. And at age 29, I just want to credit and give a shout out to Dad and Meemaw for adult parents to adult kids, because we've talked a lot about these formative years, but I really want to encourage someone of adult parents of adult kids. The more you learn how to let go of control, like my dad did. So if all they remember you as being controlling or this and that, it is never too late to learn again. It is never too late to adjust and to correct what was you thought uncorrectable. It's never too late to have a conversation. And don't give up on your kids. And kids, even if you were exasperated by your parents, it's never too late to build those bridges. I created a really rocky environment for Meemaw, and I created a rocky environment for my dad for 15 years. But they loved well. Mm-hmm. They kept sowing seeds. They would give me resources and books and things that met me where I was at without controlling me. I so appreciated Dad and Meemaw for owning mistakes that they felt they made, but they also shepherded me in a way that was firm. Like they never abdicated. They were always they're my parents. Mm-hmm. Even though I was an adult, like it didn't lessen the load of being a parent. It's just they parented different because I'm an adult now.
Yeah.
And I just want to encourage you. I don't care if you're 100, 70, I don't care if you're 50, whatever, you got adult kids. To those parents, I say this. Never, ever minimize what God can do in you and through you. And if you don't like what you see, the fruit of what you see in you or your kids, it's never too late to allow grace and honor to restore the standard in that relationship. Don't limit God based on what you think you can reason with, because it was unreasonable for my dad and Meemaw to reach me, but they did. They were relentless. But part of it was they submitted and loved well because they were loved well. They learned how to be loved well, and then they loved well, to borrow Josh's phrase. So I want to encourage, I want to release a grace, that same grace. There are some of you who have adult kids, you wouldn't say it, you'd never have probably the real desire to share it publicly, but you're hopeless. You really don't think they'll change. And you can't make them change. But you can change. And here's what I found. Every time you change in an environment, those adult kids that are so used to those habits that you hid behind identity and said, well, that's just who I am, the more God wrecks that in you, they will see that change in you, and it changes their relationship to you and opens them up for something new. This is profound because I come and talk to sometimes a lot of adult parents of adult kids, and they're like, how do I reach my kids? And I said, you can't change them, but what can God change in you? Mm-hmm. Oh. Well, but Ryan, they're the problem. No, it takes two to tango. There's always a two-way street in relationship. Yeah, but that's the problem. You think that that's the problem. The problem isn't the problem. It's the problem beneath the problem that's actually the problem. And part of the problem is we get to be more like him. So there's always growth opportunities, right? And I said this last week as I finish it up. We can't manipulate God, Josh. You can't play him. You can't emotionally throw fits and make him move. He's just too good for that. He's too savvy. So stop trying to manipulate God and throw temper tantrums and just surrender to his grace and watch him move. And as you change, your kids have the option now, because there's two trees in the garden to choose from, the tree of life or the tree of, the good knowledge of good and evil, right? There's the tree of death, tree of life. They get to see an option in you that they haven't seen if you change. If they're so used to you triggering in your emotional relationships with your adult children, and they're so used to you flying off the handle, if all of a sudden they see the heart of the Father in you and a non-triggering response consistently, that's going to have them ask questions, and it might open up an opportunity to connect with heart. Many times adult children and adult parents connect on the head level and not the heart level. But Jesus needs us to connect on the heart level, and then it moves to the head. I've seen it time and again. Love can feel almost irrational, but what we wouldn't do for our kids. But we may have to change the way we think and let God change the way we think so we can reach their hearts in a fresh new way, because we're transformed by the renewing of our mind. Pray us out, Josh.
God, I just thank you for this time that we get to just talk about relationships, and God, I just pray that we just get to know you more, that we'll be able to be better at the relationships that we have with others, our family, our friends, Lord. I just pray that you just bless the rest of the time that they have this evening or whenever they watch this, Lord. I just pray you just bless them in their relationships, Lord, and I just pray that they got something out of this, and maybe it will be next steps that will help them in their relationships, Lord. And I just thank you for each person, and we just love you and thank you, Lord, in your name.